The mother of one of the two young girls killed in a Fremont explosion is suing Horizon Biofuels, the company that owns the site. Lauren Baker's daughter, 12-year-old Haven, was in the break room with her 8-year-old sister Faya while their dad, Dylan Danielson, was working. They were the only three inside the wood pellet manufacturing plant when a dust explosion killed them. Lauren Baker claims Horizon Biofuels should never have even allowed her daughter to enter the building because of the known dangers of producing wood pellets. The suit also argues Horizon Biofuels did not control dust collection, maintain equipment properly, staff or train the workers, or fix reported issues. Baker is requesting a jury trial and is seeking damages.